Okay, we are starting. Commissioner, I'm sorry. People are indisciplined. They're not listening. Can you please close the doors? Thank you. Someone close the door. Please come up and, I'm sorry, and try to take the floor. Of course, you need no introduction, but I should say that I'm delighted that you've accepted this invitation, and it is so important for me, for the conference, to have you here to deliver a message which is not mainstream antitrust, but it is something dear to us all. I understand you'll be talking about data, which is, of course, something which matters to us in the antitrust space enormously, and ultimately, antitrust to me is also about justice, as we heard all morning. So I would be grateful if people just sat down and allow the Commissioner to deliver his address. Many thanks.
No, thank you very much. It was a pleasure to work during some months on the competition policy, and now I'm going back more and more to the rule of law, so I have a very fixed appointment this afternoon, so it's the reason why we need to start, because it will be too late. But ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure, of course, to be with you today, and many of the issues you are discussing are fundamental in shaping the political agenda and the digital sphere. And you know that we prepare at the European level the next mandate for the Parliament, for the Commission, and it's very important to think about the way forward. I'm happy to share some reflections with you based on my own experience. As Justice Commissioner, my mission has been to uphold fundamental rights in the digital sphere, including the right to privacy and protection of personal data. Given that the digital world knows no border, this mission has led me to working together with many of our international partners. I could see the similarity of the issues we face as public authorities across the world, particularly on either side of the Atlantic, and I got to experience the value of working together with these partners, discussing how best to address those issues. We had many exchanges with Lina Khan and the FTC, but also Ray Chopra and the CFPB on topics like dark patterns, fairness of financial services, and others, so to don't speak about the cookies. I'm therefore very happy to see many representatives of the US administration participating in today's discussions. Together, we have both the political leverage and the responsibility to shape a safer and fairer digital sphere. The focus of today's discussion is to highlight the interplay and synergies between competition policy, trade policy, industrial policy, and various societal goals. You are discussing how competition policy can benefit not only consumers, but also citizens, workers, and even the planet as a whole. Furthermore, competition policy can contribute to the realization of a more equal and just society and democracy. It is important to use all policy tools in conjunction with one another for these purposes. In the short period during which I said I was responsible for the competition portfolio, I could clearly see the interplay between justice, consumer protection policy, and competition enforcement. Similarly, there are very close links between tech regulation and the protection of personal data. Given the key role that data plays in the digital economy, the General Data Protection Regulation has been the bedrock of all EU flagship digital legislation of this mandate, covering tech platforms, AI, and more. In the rapidly evolving digital markets, we see that personal data processing and data protection are at the heart of some of the biggest regulatory challenges in Europe today. The basic principle of the GDPR is that citizens should be in control of their own data, and we continue to work with such a principle in all the different pieces of legislation. The GDPR requires that personal data is processed lawfully, fairly, and in a manner that is transparent for the data subject. Imbalances in power have the potential to severely hamper respect for individual rights in any context, including this one. Fairness is key to competition enforcers, and in the digitalized economy, this objective has a natural link with the fairness of data processing. Data is the key input of digital services and the digital economy, but it can also reveal citizens' personal information. This can even lead to data being used for targeted political advertising. And you know that we'll have many elections in the world this year, not only in Europe, in some European member states, but also in the US, in India, and I don't know if it's the same democracy in Russia. Market power may increase a platform's ability to collect and profit from valuable data. It can also facilitate manipulation techniques and dark patterns and practices, making it virtually impossible for data subjects to avoid being tracked. These practices have clear negative effects on citizens, consumers, workers, and of course, voters. And it is often the most vulnerable group in society, including children, who are also the most vulnerable to exploitation of their data. These practices may lead to further data accumulation and strengthening of market power, and in turn, further negative effects on citizens. Competitive and contestable digital markets may facilitate the emergence of services that are more protective of personal data. And evidence shows that when they are well informed and given the opportunity to choose, many consumers and citizens opt for services which are more protective of their privacy. Moreover, data protection rules generally also play an important role in ensuring that online marketplaces are fair and contestable for online retailers who rely on gatekeepers in order to access consumers. And you know that we will go to the entry into force of the DMA in the beginning of March. And the Digital Markets Act recognizes that allowing gatekeepers to combine personal data from multiple sources can impact the contestability and fairness within digital markets. This is why the DMA imposes extra conditions on how gatekeepers use personal data across their core platform services. Gatekeepers cannot use personal data collected for one service for other services that they provide unless the user has given consent for them to do so. And gatekeepers cannot sign users of one service into another service that it provides without the user's consent. The Digital Services Act, on the other hand, shapes the provision of online services. For example, it bans platforms from carrying out targeted advertising based on the use of the sensitive personal data of minors. Additionally, the recently approved regulation on the transparency of political paid advertising is part of the Commission's efforts to protect election integrity and support an open democratic debate. This will limit targeting and amplification techniques so as to avoid the abusive use of personal data to potentially manipulate voters. The Data Act removes technical barriers to data sharing, especially data from smart devices such as smart watches. It complements the rights to access and portability of personal data under the GDPR. And finally, the proposed Artificial Intelligence Act ensures the protection of fundamental rights and safety where AI is used. We are working on a risk-based assessment of the different kind of possible use. In certain areas, the AI Act refines EU data protection rules. This is the case, for example, regarding remote biometric identification systems, the processing of special categories of data to detect bias, and the further processing of personal data in regulatory sandboxes. While we await the adoption of the AI Act, the existing EU data protection rules apply. Data protection authorities are already dealing with the effects of AI, as is clear from several enforcement actions against ChatGPT. This takes me to another important point, enforcement. It's very nice to have a beautiful piece of legislation, but the most important element is to be able to enforce the legislation. And each of these new laws creates a specific enforcement mechanism. To establish consistency with the new rules, we are also creating EU-level structures, bringing together representatives of the various regulators. These include the high-level group of the DMA, to which data protection authorities participate. And of course, a robust enforcement of the GDPR is key. On the 28th of January, we celebrated the 6th anniversary of the GDPR. In these years, we have seen the development of a rich body of case law, guidance, and decisional practice. This brought greater legal certainty for businesses and individuals. With our proposal on GDPR procedural rules, we are acting to further enhance the efficiency of cross-border enforcement of the GDPR. The new rules will bring quicker remedies for individuals and robust final decisions. We try to ask to all the DPAs to work together earlier in the process and to exchange and to have a good cooperation in the EU and with some partners. It's an important element. We'll conclude maybe those discussions with the Parliament and the Council in the next mandate after the elections. As I've mentioned, one of my main goals as Justice Commissioner has been to cooperate with international partners to promote convergence of high levels of protection of consumers and citizens' rights around the world. For instance, I led the discussions with my US counterparts, Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo and Attorney General Merrick Garland, on the new EU-US data privacy framework. This is a concrete achievement for privacy and data protection. It provides for an adequate level of protection for personal data transfers across the Atlantic. The European Union has also made similar arrangements with other countries. In 2023, we reviewed and confirmed the adequacy decisions with Japan, South Korea, and another 11 countries across the world. You know that, of course, we have had to take 2 adequacy decisions with UK after the Brexit, and we continue to work with UK to be sure that we are staying with the same kind of rules in the European Union and in UK. Other adequacy talks are ongoing, for instance, with Brazil. Many systems around the world now have a comprehensive data protection framework in place, with strong data protection principles, rights for individuals, rules on the cross-border transfer of data, and independent methods of oversight and redress. We want to build on this convergence with like-minded countries, and we want to work towards a high protection of fundamental rights in a number of different fields, from GDPR to tech regulation and corporate sustainability due diligence, because you know that we are at the end of the discussion also on such a very important file concerning the new directive on the corporate sustainability due diligence. When like-minded partners join forces, we can find solutions that benefit our citizens and the economy. This is why I intend to launch in the coming months a network bringing together the EU, the European Union, and those partners with whom we have made data flow arrangements. So all the adequacy decisions from the past, before the GDPR that we have confirmed, the new one, like South Korea or with UK, but also with the US, the data privacy framework is an important element with a new redress mechanism and with a set of new rules for the access of intelligence agencies to the personnel data. And I have seen that it was possible to make progress at the international level, like in the OECD, with also some common rules for the access of public authorities to the personnel data. To conclude, both looking back at my experience of the last 4 years and towards the future, I would recall 3 key aspects which should continue to be of paramount importance. Firstly, the synergies of different policy tools. As competition experts, you are aware of the role competition policy plays in maintaining equity and justice in our society. And you know that we have more and more decisions to take in the competition policy in relation with the new digital world and with a real important role played by the data. Another key aspect is the need for a consistent and robust enforcement of the rules, along with constant dialogue between enforcers. And we try to reinforce that in data protection, I said, with all the DPAs and the Open Data Protection Board in Europe, but also with all the different other regulators in other policies. And finally, there is a vital need to keep this dialogue open, not only in Europe, but also across the Atlantic and with our partners around the world. This is important as our digital world does not know borders. It's my strong belief that these elements must be carried forward in any future discussion on regulation of data and tech. And I want to conclude saying that I've seen in many discussions with my US counterpart that slowly it was possible to go to the same kind of solutions or options because we are confronted with the same challenges. I remember the first discussions about the cookies and so the cookie fatigue with Lina Khan, and now we are working to try to give an answer to that. I remember the first discussion about the exchange of data with the different actors in the US, and we have seen that it's possible to have an executive order and to change dramatically the different elements of the access to a jurisdiction for European citizens and the way to collect data. But I've seen also the possible evolution on AI. We are working, I said, on AI Act, but I've seen many discussions in the White House with the big tech on AI, and at the end, an executive order with, again, the same kind of approach, not exactly the same. So thank you for such an opportunity to explain to you what I've seen during the last 4 years as Commissioner for Justice. For competition, it was very short. It was doing 3 months, but it was a good opportunity to make some links between the different policies, and maybe during another discussion, it will be possible to show that with that it's possible to go to a new industrial policy in Europe and to pay more and more attention to the place of the data in all the functioning of the single market in Europe and the trade relations with the different partners. Again, I have to move from competition to rule of law, but thank you very much for such an opportunity to be with you and to present to you some thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Just one.
Shall I jump in and ask you a question? So one question, obviously, is what is your vision for what the challenges are for the next mandate? What do you see as the big challenges? You set them out. I'll be also a bit more specific, if I may. So you mentioned GDPR being in force 6 years ago. We have seen the EDPS at the time saying we need coherent enforcement. Now the DMA, the SA talk also about coherent enforcement. With GDPR, it hasn't quite happened. Andreas Mundt tried to do it with the Facebook case, still going through the courts, although he had a success. These companies will act in a self-interested way. It's inevitable, isn't it? And yet we continue in a way to hope that we treat them a bit like normal companies that need guardrails. Do we have ever a vision? Do we see a world in which we can decide that these companies should be perhaps treated, regulated like common carriers, with particular statutory obligation on data rather than hoping they will comply?
But first of all, we have seen a set of new decisions from the data protection authorities about those big companies. Of course, that took some time to organize investigation, analysis, but then we have seen, to be concrete, huge fines against some kind of decision or action taken by the big techs. We have tried also to implement new rules, but you know that the DSA, the DMA, is for now. It's an announcement some time ago that there was a decision of the Commission, but then we have had the discussions with the Parliament, the Council, and we'll go to a real enforcement next month for the DSA. We'll have the capacity to take some decisions. At the DMA in March, we'll have also the capacity to take some decisions about the gatekeepers. So we are going more and more in such a way. But what is more important to my mind is to continue to exchange with those companies. Because there's no contradiction between the soft law and the legislation that we have put into place. To give some example, in the DSA we are fighting against hate speech or presence of unsafe products on online marketplace. But we have had before a code of conduct on hate speech with a voluntary approach and with an efficient approach with the companies. We have had also a pledge on the product safety, as product safety pledge, and it was also useful. And after the new legislation, we continue. We'll have a new ADAPT code of conduct in relation with the DSA. We have already a new pledge of many companies concerning product safety. So there are two elements. We need to be strict to have a correct application of the rules, and maybe with some fine and with decision of the regulators, but also to continue to exchange and try to work together. The next pledge will be about the cookies. And I'm sure that will come with some proposals in good relation with the different companies. On the other side, for the next mandate, of course, now we have a huge set of rules, you know that, for the green transition, the Green Deal, with many, many targets and very new legislations. We have also a set of rules for the digital transition. I have mentioned a lot of those rules. So the next step will be first the enforcement, because it's nice, again, to have many rules, but how it's possible to enforce that in the European Union. And the second will be to have an influence at the international level, to be sure that we'll have more and more level playing field due to the fact that it will be possible to apply the same kind of rules in other places in the world. But we need also to have a balanced approach, and so to be sure that with those rules, we continue to support the competitiveness of companies, the prosperity for all the citizens, an inclusive policy, and to discuss with all the actors. And to conclude, this is the reason why we are waiting a report on competitiveness from Mario Draghi. We are waiting a report on the single market from Enrico Letta, with many links with the data. And we have started, it's not a coincidence, it was decided after the summer last year, we have decided a dialogue on agriculture policy. And you know that in the 2 next days, I'm pleased to see many specialists of data in this room, but in the streets we'll have more farmers than the data specialists, I'm sure, in the next hours. Because we need also to take into account the reality of those people at work everywhere in Europe. But I will maybe come back to explain what it will be possible to do next time.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. Thank you.